The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Where there is no vision, the people perish. On the 31st of October 2021, during a live service at the New Light Covenant Ministry, the man of God, Apostle Marcel Chiatim, gave a prophetic message concerning the United States of America, calling on the church to pray for the nation USA, their internal security, and the health of their president. These were his words.
And commit USA in prayer.
Et dévouer les États-Unis en prière.
Commit them in prayer.
Dévouer-les en prière.
I still see evil coming again.
Je vois le mal qui arrive encore.
Pray for their leader.
Priez pour le leader.
Pray for his health.
Priez pour sa santé.
You can fight a battle.
Vous pouvez combattre un combat
in order to achieve something.
Pour réaliser quelque chose.
But that may come while you are not alive.
Mais cela peut arriver quand tu n'es pas en vie.
It's a parable.
C'est une parabole.
So put them in prayer.
Mettez-les en prière.
Put them in prayer.
Mettez-les en prière.
Internal security.
La sécurité interne.
I see here. Pop, 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 pop.
Je vois des bruits.
I leave this one here.
Je laisse ici.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
So I'm just giving the one I've been allowed to give.
Je donne ce que j'ai été permis de donner.
There are a lot of them here.
Ils sont nombreux ici.
So
more breaking news to report this Friday night, this time on the health of President Biden, who received a physical exam today, his first since taking office as the oldest first-term president in history. I want to talk about the results with Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's also author of the fascinating new book, World War C, Lessons from COVID-19 Pandemic and How to Prepare for the Next One. So, Sanjay, what can you tell us about the results of this physical?
Well, we had some idea of some of the president's past medical history. We also know that he's the oldest first-term president. So putting those two things together, there were specific things that I think they were sort of targeting. We know that he has this history of reflux, for example. We know that he has a history of atrial fibrillation. They were focused on the fact that his gait, his walking, Anderson, seems to have changed a bit. They described it as being less fluid, stiffer gait. We also know he takes this medication for his cholesterol, and he had a colonoscopy. So those were sort of the major things that came out of that. And there were a few findings. His reflux is still persistent, which is why they think he's been coughing a lot. You may hear him clearing his throat a lot during speeches. That seems to be the cause of that. As far as his gait being changed, they think he's developed some arthritis in his lower back. But the other big things, his atrial fibrillation appears stable. He has a history of having his brain surgery, having aneurysms operated back in the late 80s. That appears to have not changed. And then again, this colonoscopy for which he was sedated, had a colonoscopy and also had an endoscopy as well. So those are the major things that they sort of put into the report, Anderson.
Obviously, there's been a lot of focus on his cognitive abilities, questions raised by opponents and others. In 2018, the former president had a test that measured mental acuity. Was that part of today's test?
It doesn't seem like it. I read pretty carefully through the doctor's report, and they mentioned neurological exam, but that was more in terms of testing motor strength and sensation and things like that. President Trump had something known as the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It's sort of a screening test for dementia. And, there was no mention of that sort of thing here. It is a constant point of discussion, I can tell you, within the geriatrics community. I wrote this book last year about brain health, and one of the things that kept coming up was, should sort of these types of screening tests, cognitive screening tests, be more commonly done? And there's many in that community who believe starting at age 65, there should be some sort of screening that's done. Dr. Ronald Peterson, who runs the Alzheimer's Clinic at Mayo, has been somebody who's talked about that. But as far as we know, for President Biden, we didn't see any kind of test like that performed.
We should also point out that the president's physical made history today. He temporarily turned over presidential authority to Vice President Harris, which is the first time in American history that a woman had the power of the president. So an interesting day in history.